I always thought my parents loved me. After all, they were my parents. But looking back, I realized they never truly had my back. It was like they wanted me to fail, to never amount to anything. They'd never say it out loud, of course. Instead, it came through in the little things, the harsh words disguised as advice, the constant comparisons to my siblings, and the never-ending stream of expectations that were impossible to meet. I remember one day I had just finished another long day at school and I was sitting in the living room, the faint buzz of the TV in the background. My mom walked in and, as usual, she looked at me like she had something important to say. I braced myself. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken disappointment hanging between us. "You're never going to make it," she said casually, like it was just another part of the conversation. "Look at your siblings. They're out there succeeding. You're wasting time, playing around." I sat there stunned, my heart sinking. I wanted to cry, scream, or tell her everything I had been working on, but the words never came. The truth was, I had spent most of my life trying to prove myself to them, to get them to see me for who I really was, but nothing ever seemed to be enough. What hurt the most was how they always praised my siblings, constantly showering them with compliments and support. My older brother, with his perfect grades and charm. My younger sister, with her popular social life and model looks. They had it all, and I was just me. The one who didn't fit in. The one who wasn't good enough. It's funny how you can grow up in the same house and still feel like you're invisible. Like you're just a shadow passing through, never really seen. I had dreams, goals, things I wanted to accomplish. But none of that seemed to matter. They never took the time to understand who I was, what I wanted. Instead, they dismissed me as the problem child, the one who would never be able to do anything meaningful with her life. But then one day, something inside me clicked. I realized I had had enough. I was tired of the disappointment, tired of the unfair expectations. I was going to show them. I was going to prove that I could do it, and that I could do it better than they ever imagined. I had to stop playing by their rules, stop letting their doubts and judgments hold me back. And so I started. Quietly, carefully, I began working on my dreams, one step at a time. No more seeking their approval. No more waiting for them to see me for who I really was. I was going to make it happen, and they would see it whether they liked it or not. But it wasn't until I took that first real step, when I started achieving small victories, that the realization hit me. I wasn't just trying to prove them wrong. I was proving to myself that I was enough. Growing up, I was always the one in the background. My siblings were the ones who got all the attention. Good grades, sports trophies, friends always by their sides. I was different. I wasn't the perfect student, the star athlete, or the one with the perfect social circle. I was me. And I often wondered why that wasn't enough. My parents, though, didn't see it that way. My mother, especially, was always very vocal about her expectations. She wanted perfection, and she made it clear that anything less was a failure. It didn't matter that I was trying my hardest or that I had different strengths. All that mattered was that I wasn't living up to her ideal. I remember one night when I was about 16, sitting at the dinner table. I had just gotten back from a long day at school, and I had a minor disagreement with my teacher over a project. It was small, but my mom jumped on it immediately. "You always find a way to mess things up," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Why can't you be more like your brother? He doesn't complain, doesn't argue, he just does what he's told." I sat there, my hands clenched under the table. I knew it was coming, the comparison. I was tired of it. I was always in my brother's shadow, always the one who wasn't as good, who didn't do things as well. My brother, the golden child, perfect in every way. "You're just lazy," she continued, and the words hit harder than I expected. "If you tried harder, you'd be successful, but you never put in the effort." Those words stayed with me long after that night. My mother never seemed to understand that I had my own way of doing things. She didn't see the hours I spent trying, or the frustration I felt when things didn't come easy. It wasn't that I didn't want to succeed, I did more than anything. But every time I tried, it felt like I hit a wall. I didn't tell her about the nights I stayed up late, working on projects until my head ached. I didn't tell her about the dreams I had, the goals I set for myself. All that mattered was what she expected from me, and nothing I did seemed to meet her standards. She saw me as a failure, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake that feeling. And my dad? Well, he wasn't much help either. He was always distant, never really involved in the day-to-day stuff. He was too busy with work or his own hobbies to pay much attention to me. When he did, it was just to reinforce the idea that I needed to get my act together and stop being so difficult. I spent years feeling like a disappointment, like everything I did wasn't good enough. Every small failure, every misstep, felt magnified because of their constant criticisms. It seemed like no matter how much I wanted to prove myself, I couldn't win. But then, as I started to get older, I started noticing something that I had never seen before. It wasn't just that I wasn't meeting their expectations. It was that they weren't really giving me a chance to succeed. They were sabotaging me in subtle ways. My mother's constant criticism wasn't tough love. It was just her way of keeping me down. Every time I started to gain momentum, she'd tear me down again. The more I thought about it, the more I realized they wanted me to fail. They were afraid of what would happen if I succeeded. If I did well, it would be proof that they were wrong, that their way of doing things wasn't the only way. They were afraid of losing control, of losing their position as the ones who had all the answers. I started to see through their manipulation, and it hurt. It hurt because it was my own family doing this to me. I had spent so many years trying to make them proud, trying to prove that I was capable. But it wasn't about me proving myself. It was about me proving them wrong. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. I wasn't going to let their negativity and doubts define who I was. I had something to prove, not to them, but to myself. I was going to show them that I could succeed, that I could do more than they ever thought I could. One day, I made a decision. I was going to take my life into my own hands. I was done seeking their approval, and I was done feeling like I wasn't enough. I would succeed on my terms, in my way, and no one, especially not my parents, was going to stop me. I spent the next few months focusing solely on myself, my goals, and the things I was passionate about. No more distractions, no more trying to please them. I started getting serious about my future, picking up projects, learning new skills, and finding opportunities that would help me grow, both personally and professionally. I wanted to build something that couldn't be taken away from me. I wasn't just going to sit back and let my family's doubts define me anymore. It wasn't easy, though. Every time I made progress, I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to fail. I would share an accomplishment, a little win, and my mom would smile and nod, but her eyes never showed pride. It was more like indifference. She didn't believe I could make it. My dad, on the rare occasion that he spoke to me, just told me to be careful and not to get my hopes up too high. I could feel it. There was no support, no encouragement, just a quiet dismissal of everything I was working toward. But instead of letting their negativity get to me, it only fueled me further. Every time they doubted me, I pushed harder. Every time they made me feel like I wasn't enough, I reminded myself that I was more than their expectations. I started to create a life that didn't depend on their approval. One day I stumbled upon an opportunity that could change everything. I had been working on a project for months, a side business I had quietly started, something that aligned with my passions. It was a slow build, but it was starting to show real potential. The idea had come to me years ago, but I had always pushed it aside, telling myself it wasn't practical, that it wasn't something I could make work. But when I finally sat down and began working on it seriously, the results were starting to come together. I knew this could be my breakthrough. This could be the moment I proved to myself that I could build something from the ground up, without the support of my parents, without the validation of anyone else. I was doing it for me, and I could feel that this was my moment to shine. It was at this point that I realized how deep my resentment had grown. My parents had made me feel small for so long, made me believe I wasn't capable of anything, that I could never be as good as my siblings. But now I had a real chance at success on my own terms. And as much as I hated to admit it, I was determined to show them I didn't need their approval to succeed. They thought I was nothing more than the kid who would never make it. I would prove them wrong, and I was going to make sure they saw it. I decided to take things a step further. I didn't just want to succeed. I wanted to rub it in their faces, make sure they knew that I didn't need them to be successful. I had spent years trying to prove I was worthy of their love and respect. But now it was about showing them that I could achieve greatness without any of their support or encouragement. I started keeping my progress to myself, carefully building my business and quietly getting things in motion. But as my project started to gain traction, I couldn't help but think back to all the times they had told me I'd never amount to anything. I remembered my mother's words. "You'll never make it. Look at your siblings. They're the ones who matter." It stung, but it also gave me the final push I needed. There was one particular moment that truly marked my turning point. My mom, after not hearing much from me about my plans, casually mentioned one day, "Are you still wasting your time with that nonsense? Why don't you just focus on something that will actually make you money? Your siblings are out there securing their futures, and you're still playing around." Those words broke something inside me. It wasn't just the typical jab. It was the culmination of everything I had been working towards, everything I had tried to prove. But now, it wasn't about me trying to get her approval anymore. It was about proving to myself that I didn't need them to succeed. I knew that if I could make this work, I could not only prove my worth to them, but I could finally be free of their expectations. The anger that had been building inside me for years became a driving force. It wasn't just about success anymore. It was about freedom. Freedom from the chains they had placed around me. Freedom from their toxic need to hold me back. Freedom to prove that I was capable of everything they never believed I could do. I doubled down. I started networking, reaching out to potential clients and partners, pushing myself further than I had ever done before. I didn't want to just succeed. I wanted to do it in a way that would leave them speechless. And the more I worked, the more I saw the fruit of my labor. Things were beginning to align. My business was growing, and people were taking notice. But then, as things started to take off, something unexpected happened. My parents, who had never taken my ambitions seriously, started reaching out. They began asking questions about my progress, offering advice as if they had always believed in me. They wanted to know how they could help, as if they hadn't been the ones telling me I couldn't do it all these years. I had a choice now. I could let them back in, allow their approval to flood back in and let it affect my progress, or I could do something else, something I had never done before. The decision felt almost too easy. I had worked too hard, come too far, and sacrificed too much to let my parents back into my life the way they once were. I didn't need their approval anymore. Their encouragement felt hollow now, like a last-ditch attempt to make up for years of belittling me. I had built something from nothing, something that was mine, something I could be proud of. I wasn't about to let them hijack my success just because it had finally started to show. So I did the one thing I knew would shock them. I didn't tell them what I was working on anymore. Instead, I focused even harder, pushing my business further, reaching new clients, and expanding faster than they ever thought possible. I didn't need their advice, their approval, or their praise. They had written me off for too long, and I was done waiting for their validation. The more they reached out, the more I stayed silent, showing them through my actions that I was no longer that kid they could control with their criticisms. The tipping point came one evening when my mother invited me over for dinner. As usual, I had been keeping my distance, letting my work consume me. But that night, I decided to go, just to show them how far I had come and to show them what they had missed. They had no idea what was coming. I walked into the house, and the usual smug looks and passive-aggressive comments followed. "So, what's this business you're always working on?" "Still nothing serious, I bet," my mom remarked with a thin smile. I stayed quiet, knowing this was my moment. They had always underestimated me, belittled me, and written me off as the failure of the family. Now it was time for me to show them who had truly succeeded. I let the silence hang for a moment before I finally said, "Actually, it's going pretty well. I just closed a deal that's worth more than anything you or Dad ever thought I could pull off. I'm doing better than you'll ever understand." Their faces dropped. My mother's eyes widened and my dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. They didn't know what to say. It was the moment I had been waiting for. For all the times they'd told me I couldn't, I wasn't capable, I'd never be enough. Now I was showing them the truth with nothing but raw proof. "I know you don't get it," I continued, looking directly at my mom. "But I'm not the failure you made me out to be. I didn't need your approval, and I didn't need your advice. I made this happen on my own, and it's only going up from here." The shock on their faces was priceless. For the first time in my life, I saw them both speechless, unable to deny the reality sitting right in front of them. They had always acted like they were in control, like I would always fall short of their expectations. But now I was the one with the power. I was the one who had succeeded in spite of them. And that wasn't all. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. I had earned this moment. It was time to finish what I had started. I looked at them, my voice steady and firm. "I've been proving myself for years, and I've been doing it without you. So from now on, don't expect me to show up asking for your approval. I've learned I can do it on my own, and that's how it's going to stay." It wasn't anger that fueled my words, but a sense of liberation. I had spent so many years trying to make them proud, trying to meet their impossible standards. But in that moment, I realized that their approval didn't matter anymore. I was free. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. I wasn't the child they could manipulate anymore. I wasn't the one who needed to prove my worth to them. I had built something real, something they couldn't take away from me, no matter how hard they tried. Their plan, their manipulation, their need to keep me down, it had all backfired. They thought I'd always be the failure, but now I was the one who was successful, and I would never apologize for it. In the days that followed, I felt a mix of relief and empowerment. My parents, still in shock, tried to regain their footing, but nothing they said could undo the weight of that moment. They were forced to confront the truth that I had succeeded without their help, without their validation, and despite their constant doubts. It was a bitter pill for them to swallow, but I didn't care anymore. Their opinions no longer held the power they once did. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for their approval. I was moving forward, doing things on my own terms, and nothing was going to stop me now. I continued to grow my business, expanding it in ways I never thought possible, reaching new milestones every day. I built my confidence up brick by brick, and with each success, I could feel the old version of me, the one who constantly sought their approval, fading away. My parents, on the other hand, started to change too. They couldn't help but acknowledge what I had done, even if they hated to admit it. Every now and then, my mom would call saying, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished." But there was something hollow in her voice, a hesitation that told me she didn't truly understand or appreciate the journey I'd gone through to get there. She was proud of the result, but still couldn't let go of the idea that she was somehow entitled to be the one to shape my future. My father was quieter about it, as expected. He'd always been distant, and he didn't know how to express emotions. But the way he looked at me when we crossed paths, there was a shift in his eyes. He could no longer deny that I had done something great. I had built something for myself, something real, and no amount of silence or distance could take that away from me. But that wasn't the end. I had achieved my personal victory, but the real test came when I saw them trying to get back into my life in a way that felt like they were trying to claim ownership of my success. They wanted to be involved, to take credit for what I had built. My mother, always the strategist, started making small suggestions about how I could expand even more. "You should really consider getting into real estate," she'd say, as if I needed her guidance to take the next step. It took all of my willpower to hold back my frustration. I could see the pattern. They wanted to take credit for my success. They didn't want to be left behind, even though they had done nothing to support me along the way. I could feel their need to assert control, to somehow be the ones who got to say, "I told you so." But I refused to let them do it again. I had learned my lesson. I had broken free from their grasp. and I wasn't about to let them reclaim that power. So I made the decision to pull back, to keep my success to myself and protect what I had built. No more sharing my achievements with them. No more seeking their approval. They had their chance to be part of my life, and they had chosen to stay on the sidelines. Now it was my turn to take full control of my future. I continued to flourish, building my business even more and surrounding myself with people who truly supported me. Friends who believed in me without the need for comparisons or criticisms. I became someone who no longer needed validation from others. I was proud of the path I had carved, proud of the work I had done, and most importantly, proud that I had done it on my own. As for my parents, well, they remained in my life, but the dynamics had changed. They knew now that I didn't need them in the same way. I wasn't their project anymore. I was my own person, with my own goals and dreams. And while they may have wished for a different outcome, one where they could still control and guide me, I was the one who had the last word. In the end, I had succeeded, not just in business, but in life. I had learned to stand up for myself, to trust my own instincts, and to prove to myself that I was enough without their approval. And as I looked back at that moment when I finally stood up to them, I knew one thing for sure. I had finally broken free.